You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call. I've got Brad Hunt here beside me, and today's podcast is with Mark Livesay from Treeline Academy. On this show, Mark goes into detail on burns. Everybody knows that a good burn can produce some of the best deer and elk habitat and just wild game in general.
Right. Yeah.
And you have a lot of good critters that kind of gravitate toward burns as they age. Mark's going to get into those details to help you leverage your hunt areas a little better, or the states you're in, or determining what tag you want to get. Understanding burns can make a huge difference in your hunt success. So he breaks it down on this podcast, and he also explains why his mapping toolkits are important. I heard him talk about these mapping toolkits a little bit ago, and I'm like, I don't get it. I don't know what you mean. Like, what do you mean a mapping toolkit, and what's its value and all of that? And for those that have downloaded and purchased Mark's e-scouting course, which is incredible, you kind of know, because you've messed around with it, perhaps what we're talking about. This was something that the people who used his course before really was requesting these toolkits, primarily Ryan Lampers. And so what happened was Mark has gone out and custom built all these electronic tools to plug into your mapping systems so you can get at data that you couldn't get otherwise. Yep. Mark breaks it down in detail, and these kits are cheap. You can get the toolkit for $20 let's say you hunt Colorado, it's $20, or it's $39.99 for
like 5 or 6 states.
All the states he's created the toolkits for, including like Arizona and Wyoming and Montana. Yep. And every new state he adds and all the updates he ever makes. So it's kind of like a no-brainer for $39. And I think with the code GRITTY, you get it for even less, a few bucks off, 20% or 15%. So use the code GRITTY when you buy the toolkits or the e-scouting course. You're going to get a discount. But these toolkits are invaluable. Before, you would have to go and find this data from Montana. You'd have to have this data from Colorado, this data from this agency and that agency, and then you'd have to feed it into your map tool to figure out what's going on.
Or just spend hundreds of days putting boots on the ground trying to figure this stuff
you'd have
out.
to leverage a hunt app, one of the other hunt apps that are out there, which condenses or eliminates a lot of this data because they want to make it really user-friendly to every person that downloads the apps. Yep. And this isn't to replace any hunt apps, by the way. This is just to augment what you already have. It's just another tool in the toolkit.
Correct.
But I can't recommend it enough. If you're listening to the podcast, go watch it, because Mark has put in visuals throughout this show. He and I are on his couch talking about it. He took the time to lay down the images so you can see what he's talking about. And see the custom work he's done to build out these tools. Yep. So very cool. You're going to like it. I have 2 more episodes I recorded with Mark that are follow-ups to this episode. One was on grazing, which is really interesting because I've been on hunts where they've hit by sheep or they're hit by cattle.
Correct.
And you're like, man, this sucks. Or
I wish I'd have known they were feeding in this location at this time. Like, you can figure out all that information.
And Mark talks about the impacts of grazing on your hunts. Yep. And sometimes it's not a lot. Sometimes it's devastating. Yeah. So it gets into that. And again, there is so much data that gets left off of other tools. With his toolkits, you know so much. It's just, and the visuals, he'll get you through that. The third one we recorded was
the recreational.
This one's big.
It is.
This is just big for family outings and your like where the campgrounds are across the United States, what the phone numbers are to every single campground, what the road access is,
trails that are open, what are not open.
Again, data collected from these various sites that plugs into his tool and auto updates or updates manually. He has to go do some of that every year, but once you buy that toolkit, it will always be refreshed, and he shows you all of that stuff. It's an awesome show. Mark is he's a mad scientist on this stuff.
He's a genius when it comes to that.
And it has revolutionized our scouting and our hunting trips. So check this one out. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you get the toolkits. Even if you didn't download the e-scouting classes from Mark, the toolkits you're going to want them. They're $39. If you hunt Montana, Colorado, Wyoming, any of those places, $39. Import them into your computer tools, and boom, you are in business.
It will change your e-scouting life, I
It
promise.
will. It will. It's very cool stuff. So hopefully you watch this episode on our YouTube channel. Leave us a comment if you have questions. Mark will get back to you on all of that. And we try to respond to every comment on the YouTube channel as always. So leave us a comment. We'll get to it, and we'll get back to you. And as always, thank you for supporting us. Stay gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am at the house of the domicile of Mark Livesay with Treeline Academy, e-scouting courses, the Llama Wrangler. What else? The ex-Ironman athlete. And now, old man.
Yeah, that's true.
I think I nailed it all right there. Like, stuck that landing. We're at your house. We're going to do a podcast today about burns, why they matter for elk hunting. We're going to get into your forte, which is your e-scouting skill set that you're so famous for. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to want to go and watch it. Really, because Mark and I are going to overlay the images of these tools that we're going to leverage for how to maximize this burn scouting and some other things that we're going to look into today on our discussion on the podcast. So I highly recommend you go and watch this on our YouTube channel to get the most out of it. If you're in your car right now and you can't, you can listen to it and go back and see what we're talking about when you tune into the YouTube channel and see the video or a Rumble channel. So, Mark, let's get into this today. Tell me about burns and why they matter. We're about to elk season. What is the date today? We're talking almost August.
We're mid to late July, getting into August. If you're starting your e-scouting, you're probably a little behind the gun. So you're going to have to speed up your learning curve here.
Okay.
But one of the questions I get asked probably the most in my course is burns. You know, everybody knows that. Oh, geez.
You're fine.
This is Boomer.
Hi, Boomer.
The new addition to the family. So I get a lot of questions about burns because burns and elk kind of go together.
Yeah.
And when I look for elk spots, I break them down for 12 criteria.
Okay.
So I want to mention that if you haven't been listening to a lot of podcasts of yours, we did a whole series on the course, and we broke down those 12 features.
Yep.
And it was called the Art of Finding Elk series.
Yep.
So you can look back through your archive and see that if you want to get a little more detail on those. But burns are one of the hot ticket items when it comes to elk and finding elk. But
why?
That's what I was getting ready. So, but breaking down and analyzing burns is not as simple, maybe, as it seems on the surface. You would think that, well, if I went and found a 3 to 5 year old burn, they would just be full of elk. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't believe that.
Now, back up. Because I think you're coming at a premise from assuming that a lot of guys out there understand how valuable hunting a burn is and why burns matter. I think you got to back up a little bit because you've been doing this a long time. Somebody who is maybe, from let's say the East Coast, where like Missouri, like your background, and they're just kind of coming out west or thinking about it, or even a guy that's just picking up. Let's start a little bit there. Burns matter because.
Good point. I kind of want to just jump to the end, right?
Yeah.
I like to read the last chapter, right? So burns. What burns do for elk is they disrupt two things. Mm-hmm. They disrupt the canopy of trees, and they disrupt the surface of the ground. And the combination of the two creates fantastic growth.
Gotcha.
Vegetation growth. But what it creates that elk are after, from the studies I've read, is the edge habitat. What burns create is this edge habitat. And if you look at all the studies of elk, it's overwhelmingly evident that elk prefer the edge of these broken edge of meadows, edges of burns, edges of beetle kills, edges of any kind of edge environment.
Yeah.
But burn edges are particularly attractive to elk because
Crack cocaine.
Because a lot of people think that elk like to eat grasses, and they want to think of elk like cattle, which is true. But what elk, if you look at all the studies, what elk really like is they like variety. They like to go to the buffet, I always say.
Yeah.
And that edge of the burn, particularly, even out in the burn, but it creates that buffet of vegetation.
Right.
Forbs, grasses, woody plants, all of those combine to be incredibly attractive to elk.
Years ago, because I did a lot when I was younger, a lot of what I did was, sneak out after work or before work or take a few days off and go hunt blacktails. And in Oregon, in the Willamette Valley, especially, or Mount Hood area or Estacada, where I would spend most of my time hunting blacktail bucks, we would look for any kind of edge environment. If we could get 3 different types of habitats to like intersect on each other, a clear cut, a reprod, an old growth, boom, all 3 like right there. It was like a guarantee almost that there was going to be deer activity right there, some big bucks. There's something about those edge habitats. And I'm not always sure that it's all, I think the sunlight hitting all that open country, all that open brush gives them options, right? The other thing is blackberry bushes, like waves and giant, like they tend to just pop on the edge of a burn. And then you got the green shoots here, and then you got the woody stuff. But I think it's also cover, Mark. They can get the buffet and take 2 steps into and be hidden again. Yeah. And they want that thick. And then you have the old growth, which isn't that you can't, they're still exposed in that tall, older canopy type stuff. When it's that medium burn, it's so thick, they can take 3 steps into some of that type of growth, and you can't see them. This is in Oregon, of course, I'm referring to.
Yeah.
But I think some of that's just cover as well, like safety as next in proximity to the food.
So one of the studies that I reference in my course is there was a study done on what is the distance from the edge that the elk prefer the most. And it was a bell curve, and we'll show it on the screen as we're talking about it. Yeah. So if you mentioned earlier, make sure you watch this version. Mm-hmm. But we're looking at this bell curve right now. And what you can see by this is the further away from the edge you get, the elk prefer it less and less. But here's what the kicker was. Yeah. This is what shocked me. You mentioned this, Brian, but on that curve, the elk prefer the 50 feet on the open side of the edge exactly the same as the 50 feet on the timbered side. So what that tells you is that the vegetation variety, both in the timber or the thicker area and in the open side of the edge, is preferred exactly the same. I had no idea of that. So, for example, let's say you're glassing elk, and maybe you're glassing this burn, and you're not seeing the elk, but you know they're there because the sign is there. Yeah. Well, remember, they prefer the timber side as much or more as the open side. Wow. So they might be feeding just inside the timber. So that study really opened my eyes to my hunt planning strategies when it comes to breaking down burns and edge habitats. And I really would have never guessed that they prefer it the same.
Okay, now convince me that there's going to be more elk in a burn than in the other habitat.
Well, again, here's the thing. I talk to Brady about this all the time.
Brady Miller?
Yeah, Brady Miller, Go Hunt. He's really big on this. We consume research article after research article after research article. Because, guys, these research articles were never done for hunters, right? Yeah. They weren't created for us. Mm-hmm. All this edge habitat, they're looking at, like, when they log an area, how much overbrowsing can occur, how many trees are damaged by the elk, how do they use the burn and the regrowth, and for replanting trees and all kinds of reasons, right? But these research articles are invaluable for us as hunters, because what they tell us is how the elk is using this habitat. So even though they were not done with hunting in mind, there's so much information in these types of articles that is available to you. So, I know we listen to hunting podcasts. I know we watch hunting YouTubes. I know we take courses, but don't overlook the power of reading, elk objective reports, doing searches for abstracts on elk habitat. So, Burns, you asked me why. Again, I sound like a broken record. I'm going to refer to research. Research studies have shown that elk prefer burns 70% more than non-burned areas.
Yeah.
That's a big number, guys. It's a big number, and it decreases over time past 5 years. So the bell curve again. Yep. The elk prefer it highly till about 5 years. And then the use or the desire starts to go down after 5 years. Now, that does not mean that elk won't be in a 10-year-old burn. It just means that these studies have shown.
Like if they had a 10-year-old burn next to a 3-year-old burn right next to each other, they're probably going to be densely populated in that 3-year-old more than the 10.
That's right. And we're going to talk about this coming up. But what I'm starting to uncover now, this is a good tip, is these double burns. I've been looking at this for bears.
Explain that.
What I mean by a double burn is a burn, let's say that burnt 20 years ago.
Yep.
And then it grew up. There was a bunch of dead trees on the ground. We had some regrowth. And then there was another burn event that comes through and burns that area again.
Have you ever been in those areas where the burn doesn't quite burn the trees but kills them all?
Right.
Then they fall over.
Right.
And now you have all this dead wood, and you're like, I'm not hunting there for another 50 years. But then a fire comes and burns all the
wood. Ground cover.
Now it's open again.
Not only open, but think about the fertilizer that just got put in the ground from all that dead trees.
Yeah.
So I am starting to realize, and again, this is my own theory, Brian. There's no studies that I know of on this. But I stumbled on this when we started looking for bear hunting spots. Every time we got into a double burned situation, the bears were just freaking everywhere. Like this spot we hunt a lot. Yeah. It's double burned.
Yeah.
And you notice how clear the ground is in that area, right?
You can walk right through it.
You can walk because so what it did was it removed all the deadfall, so it opened up more sunlight to the ground. And now
and animals, elk and stuff, they don't want to have to step over just a million
feet. They like the
top.
Path of least resistance.
Lincoln logs that just spread out, or matchsticks like you talk about.
And so when you're e-scouting an area, guys, you need to know about these older burns. And I hope we're gonna get into that in just a second. But if you're using the traditional hunting apps, and that's all you're using, and I want to be clear about that, I use all the apps. I love the hunting apps, but it's not my only tool. And Burns is one reason why. There's a lot of reasons, but Burns is one, because what they've done is they kind of have to build these apps for everybody, right? The lowest common denominator. I mean, you mentioned the Missouri boys. I'm not going to throw them out. I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but so for example, most of the hunting apps are limited to about 10 to 12 years of history of fires. So if there's a burn in that area that's 22 years old, you have no idea. If you look at your hunting app, there's not going to be a red border around it.
So why is a 20-year-old fire good?
Well, it's good and bad. If you march into an area and you don't look close enough, and you could have a lot of deadfall from a 20-year-old fire, and you didn't see it on your map because you're like, there was no fire here, and you get there and there's trees everywhere, right? Now, a 20-year-old fire, in my opinion, is not that good unless it double burned. So what I'm looking for is a 20-year-old fire that reignited from some lightning or something caused that area to burn again, let's say 3 years ago.
Yep.
That, for me, that would be the perfect scenario.
So what you're saying is, like, you can find out from a hunt map that a fire is 3 years old. But what you might not know is that fire is a double burn.
That there was a previous fire 22 years ago.
Right.
You'll never be able to uncover that using just your hunting app.
And that's like, we'll call that like a super burn.
Right.
Like it's like a burn on steroids. You're saying like it's just that much better of a burn than even just a regular 3 or 4 year old burn.
Now, I will tell you, the verdict is still out for me on elk on this, but I know for a fact. Well, I don't know for a fact. I'm telling you, with bears, every time we have gone into a double burned area, we seem to turn up bears.
Yeah.
It's almost like magic.
Yeah.
But why would the bears be there and the elk not be there? So,
well, that's not what we've seen. We've seen just as many elk in those spots.
Well, we
like
have
the elk are just piled in.
Oh, and these are traditional low elk spots that we're in as well.
Yeah, true.
Right? Think about it. The areas that we're hunting are not like the top of the food chain of the elk units, right? But the elk are there.
Yeah.
And maybe they're there for that, but I'm starting to put together more and more data of my own, data points of where I'm finding elk and how they're relating to these double burns. But so
okay, so the hunting apps don't necessarily tell you that kind of information about the burns. You showed me this before we started the podcast, and this is what I want you to really bring to the audience is, okay, why show me what you've brought to the table for people to analyze burns and the best way to do that to maximize their scouting work efforts.
Okay, so when I originally talked, a year ago, when I built the e-scouting course, I tried to teach people how to build these custom data sets that they could put into Google Earth Pro to show burns, show livestock, show all these features, right? And it's been the most challenging part of the course because it's pretty technical.
So let me rephrase that. Okay, so what we have is a guy goes into Google Earth. He opens the map, he looks at it, and if he hasn't done anything to customize it, it's really pretty high level. It'll show you things, but it won't give you the detail that what you're talking about.
When you open up Google Earth Pro, now remember when I say Google Earth Pro, guys, I'm talking about the installed version.
Yep.
Not Google Earth, not GoogleEarth.com, and not the Google Earth mobile. To venture into the things that we're getting ready to talk about, you have to use the Google Earth Pro application that's installed on a computer, not a mobile device, not an iPad. So just keep that in mind.
Installed on your computer, and the reason that this tool installed on your computer, Google Earth Pro, is the go-to tool for you. You're going to use your hunt apps at the same time,
right?
I see you have one hunt app screen open on this side of your computer, and then on another screen you have Google Earth Pro open, and you're looking back and forth. But the thing about Google Earth Pro is you can customize this thing to tell you way, way more, and you can drill down a little, I think, easier than you can with all the other tools that are out there.
You're exactly right. And so people always ask me, hey, Mark, what's your what do you recommend for my e-scouting setup? I get that question all the time. 2 monitors. It really doesn't matter what computer you have because you're talking about all the hunting apps are web-based, meaning you access them through a browser.
Yeah.
It takes very little computer power to do that. And Google Earth Pro, same thing. It's a very old program.
Yeah.
Takes almost no computing power. You do not have to have a fancy computer.
Right.
Mac or PC. But what I recommend is double monitors. Meaning, like you just said, you've got your hunting app on one, you've got Google Earth, the Google Earth on steroids that we're going to talk about on the other.
Right.
And when you use both of these in tandem, you're able to maximize the features of both. I say this all the time, guys. There's not one hunting tool that does everything. There's some that do some things well, but none of them do everything.
So to skip ahead, you've got Google Earth Pro. An average guy logs in and he's looking at it to find out the hunting units, where he wants to be, where his unit is, where the trailheads are, where the campgrounds are, where the burns are, blah, blah, blah. A lot of that detail you can customize into Google Earth Pro, but a guy has to do that. And it's a process of being a little techie. You got to go out and go, okay, where's my hunt units, and download that stuff.
Download the KML files, the KMZ files, and the shape files.
Yeah, I don't even know what you're talking about.
It gets complicated.
But what you have done, because Lampers, you're gonna have to give him some credit here, even though.
Well, because let's be honest, he needs a little hand holding. Basically, what he said was, I needed to do it so that he could use it that way.
Yes. So what happens is, you've had an e-scouting course for a couple of years, 2-3 years now. It's really empowering. You walk people through all these features on their Google Earth Pro, along with other tools to scout.
Right.
And one of the things that was part of the course is that people needed to go in and get all their settings dialed, customize their preferences in Google Earth, and then import a lot of data into it. And the problem is that part of it was a pain in the ass, and most people will struggle with it, including Lampers, because he's horrible with technology and cameras and a whole bit. So he said, Mark, you should just create bundles where people can just, instead of making them go and get the files and get this and get that and import and just create a package of it. Like in here, I'm looking at your screen right now. You have Colorado map data or Montana map data toolkit. You're saying you pretty much bundled all this stuff into one package for each of those states, Wyoming, Oregon, Montana, Idaho, and more you're adding, so that they can just kind of go get that from you. Boom, it updates their Google Earth Pro app, and now it's got all the features.
It's got everything they need, and they don't have to learn how to
do anything. They don't have to do any of that.
So it's not
they can just get right into scouting.
Right, and it's not just the data, Brian. It's like when you go get the fire data, for example. Let's say you know where it's at, and you go download it, and you format it, and you install it into Google Earth. Well, the problem is it comes in solid white blocks. Mm-hmm. It's not very usable. So not only did I prepare the data, I went through and styled all the data the way we want to use it as hunters. Yeah. So, for example, fires. Let's just take a look at the fires real quick.
Yeah. Show me the fires.
So I'm going to open up the Colorado toolkit here. And we're going to click on the fires. We're going to turn on the fires. And I'm going to move over here. So to know where we're at, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the Colorado game management unit borders.
Okay, let's talk about that real quick, because the game management unit borders, if somebody did import that, it doesn't have the numbers on, the unit numbers.
Right. All these states, guys, when you're at the mercy of each state, there's not one central depository for all this information. Guys, to build these toolkits, I literally had to go to hundreds of locations to get this data. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Colorado. When you download the Colorado unit borders from the Fish and Game, they've got the file, but they don't have labels. So
there's like 400. How many units are in Colorado?
There's probably about 100.
That's more than 100, dude.
No, now they do go to 400, but they skip a lot of numbers too.
Okay.
So there's probably about 100 here, maybe a little more. So, I mean, the borders by themselves are not that usable.
No, you need the numbers.
You need to know what number you got. So when you get the toolkits, that's one of the features, is you get all the borders, and they're the current 2023 borders with all the changes.
Okay. So when they get a toolkit and they bring this data into their Google Earth Pro application, it's going to show all the borders for the units and the unit numbers, something that has to be custom built, which you've done for them.
Right. So now we've got...
now I can see my units in the state. I can go, oh, I'm in unit 51.
Yeah, let's just go right here. So we're in here's 501 and 51.
Yep.
And here's a fire or two fires.
Yep.
That are in between both those units.
I see it.
So what I did with this data, and this is what I was talking about, when you download this raw data, if you did it yourself,
it'd be white.
It's going to be white block, and it's going to be solid. So what I wanted to do was make it where the fires were red, just because, makes sense. Yeah. And I wanted to give it a 50% transparency.
Some opacity.
And I wanted to make it random red. So you notice right here, this red is darker than this red.
Yep.
So it helps differentiate the fires.
Okay.
And then I added a white border to all the fires. That was important. Because when we talked about the double burns, you've got to be able to see where they overlap. So without the white borders, I couldn't see the double burns. So I know this sounds complicated, but so here's a fact where I don't know that this is overlapping. I don't think it is right there. But I think you get the point.
Yeah.
Is
how can I figure out how old that burn is?
So all of the data in the toolkits, when you click on an individual fire, it pops open an info window that tells you the name of the fire, the year of the fire, and this is important. When you're looking at a burn, and let's say, Brian, that you want to try to hunt a burn that's happened last year.
Yeah.
If that burn started in September, or let's say August or September, I would be a little nervous about going to a burn that didn't have time to grow.
It's just dirt. Ash.
It may not be as good as you think.
Yeah.
But if I looked at this and I saw it started in June 8th, I'd be like, okay. If they started on June the 8th and they got it out in the summer, then there was a lot of time for that year for some growth. So this year it could be good.
You're right.
So the start date for me is important.
It's got the year, the start date month, and the start day, the actual date of the month.
It's got the acreage, and it's also got the InsaWeb number. What that means is this fire ID. You can Google that number and go to all the details about that fire. What roads were closed, what roads were built, when it got put out. There's just you can take it one step further if you want. So you can use this data, and some of this data is not very usable, of course.
Yeah.
But
wow.
One of the fires that you click on, like that one, we click on this one, it'll be the same. Now this is the same fire, but this click on this one. This is a different fire. 2012 fire started June 23rd. And there's a name of the fire. So again,
that's powerful.
Some of the same info that's in your hunting app, but here's the difference. You remember we talked about double burns and older fires. Well, all the hunting apps are limited to about a dozen years.
Yeah.
So if you expand this folder, all the toolkits work the same way. Every individual data fire, you can expand it.
Ooh.
So you can see once I expand it, I've got all of the 1980s, all of the 1990s. I blocked them up and I grouped them up into what I thought was usable.
Yeah.
So what I did was I grouped all the really old fires, so you don't have to go and turn on 40 different layers.
Yeah.
So I can quickly turn off all of the old fires. So now you notice those went away.
Yeah.
So now I'm only looking at fires since 2015.
Are there any in there?
So let's zoom out.
Okay.
So then when we zoom in here to this one and we click on it, we can see that this is
You're not on the fire.
2021.
Okay.
So that's a recent fire. 2021, East Troublesome Fire, how many acres, when it started, when they created this fire. There's a lot of data in there. Some of the newer fires.
Yeah, this is more comprehensive.
Some of the newer fires,
they've
got more data available, right?
Yeah.
So, but now we can start clicking them off, right? So if I want to only hunt fires in the last 3 years, I feel like I really want to focus on the last 3 years. And I can only turn on 3 years worth of fires. And I can see the fires.
So you can't really do that in the Hunt app.
Now, Go Hunt allows you to individually turn on the years of the fires, but they only have 12 years of fires. I like the fact that Go Hunt allows you to turn off the years. I really like that.
Yeah. That's through their desktop app.
Yes, I like that. No, I think it's available on the mobile too.
Oh, okay.
But if you're trying to look at, guys, there is nothing worse than going to a hunting area and pulling up to the trailhead and finding out there's a 20-year-old burn there that you didn't know was there. Because a 20-year-old burn, there's going to be a lot of stuff on the ground.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's horrible.
And if you don't take the time to zoom in on Google Earth and really check it out, you may not realize there's so much on the ground.
How long does it take for, just for people out there? I'm sure it varies, right? Depending on how severe the burn is and whatnot. But on average, a burn will come through, and you got those burns where everything's burned to the dirt. You got those burns where it doesn't burn as hot and it leaves all the trees standing.
Yeah.
How do you when does it turn out that you're looking at an area And about what time does the area become impossible to walk through?
Well, a lot of factors on that, but that 7-8 year window, a lot of things are going to start hitting the ground. 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
Now,
And
as
then
you and
what
I
about
found out,
beetles?
beetle kills 10 to 15.
Okay.
Beetle kill, remember, they kill the trees. They're not damaging the structure of the trees. They're killing it, and it slowly dies. So it takes typically longer for a beetle kill tree to fall than a fire tree to burn. Half the trees burnt.
Yeah.
It's going to break over quicker, right? But you remember the bear hunt we went on, the very first bear hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Classic case. Old burn.
Yeah.
Not on the map. My first hunt with you guys, we rolled up to the trailhead, and we were
where we were covered in soot the whole time.
Yeah, we were driving in, right, and we started seeing all these trees on the ground.
Uh-huh.
I mean, blowing into the road.
Yeah.
Remember, we pulled in the campground. We almost couldn't even get in there.
Right.
And we're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there was a wind event. Some kind of storm had knocked down a bunch of that old burn.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's so many variables, but it's old enough though that you're running the risk of being really tough country to hunt.
But we knew it was an old burn.
Mm-hmm.
We knew going into it. But if you would have looked at any of the hunting apps, that burn's too old. It would not have shown up.
Yeah.
So we knew going there that there was a risk.
Right.
That there's going to be some trees down.
Yeah.
And we got there and they were down.
Mm-hmm.
It was a rough hike in, right?
One of the worst.
One of the things I want to talk about real quick is you mentioned this, like how long does it take for them to fall down? And remember I told you about going and looking them up on that INSA website? When you go to those INSA web or these fire information sites to look up a fire in your hunt area, you can read about, did it burn? Was it a crown fire, meaning burning through the tops of the trees only? Did it nuke it?
Yeah.
Did it?
You can look that up.
You can, but you need the name of the fire, and you might need the number that incident number.
So you click on that.
You get on it, and then you go search it. It gives you another portal.
Yeah.
To go one step further. So for example, if I'm interested in this fire right here.
Mm-hmm.
I would not only want to know that, okay, this is fire and it's what year. I'd want to know everything I could know about that fire.
Mm-hmm.
When it started, how long it burned, how long it took him to put it out. And then I would zoom in. So this fire is a pretty intense fire, I can tell you already, because do you see there's no gaps in the middle here. And the edge is pretty defined.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But look at this fire right here.
Right. It's like.
You see that edge?
Yeah.
And you see the pockets, the little bird pockets?
Yep.
So I call it mosaic. When I see this kind of fire, I get excited.
Yeah.
Like, see where these two fires connect. And this is the kind of burn that's going to leave a lot of trees. And that edge, when you see an edge that looks that jagged, like
I love it.
You were giving the example earlier, we were talking about
a duck
pond.
Yeah, if you have a duck pond, they did studies. This was in Oregon. They were trying to figure out habitat for a duck and how to, because a lot of people will build their own ponds, Well, if you just have an oval, the surface area where your duck habitat and where they lay their eggs and where they get their feed is all about the surface area of the bank. And when you have,
or the linear distance of the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you might have the same amount of water in basically in an area that's just an oval, or you have the same amount of water, but it's like a mosaic. It's got jagged peninsulas that jet out, little coves and stuff. And it's just the more surface area you can dig into, the more area for sunlight to hit and more of that edge growth to grow, more areas for the ducks to hide, to not be seen from one side of the pond to the other side of the pond. All that little surface area increases habitat. It's some like insane amount, and the ducks thrive in those types of ponds. So you could have 10 times the density, because you can study how much surface area a duck needs, bank surface area. How many ducks can I suppose inhabit a certain surface area. And then what happens is if one pond can maybe sustain 20 ducks, another one can sustain 100, same body of water, just it has more surface area on the bank. So
more edge habitat.
Right. So it's the same concept here.
Same concept. So, I mean, I know nothing about this area.
Sure.
But just looking at
somebody's like watching this going, that's
is
my hunt area.
But of this whole area, let's assume it was all, roadless and everything was equal. I would want to focus in right here.
It looks incredible
because this
reminds me of sort of your areas in Oregon where they clear cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got like timber cut here, and you have just these Roosevelt elk will just come out on this little opening, graze, and then tuck back in and feed on the edge. And you're saying 50 feet in, 50 feet out. They kind of like the both sides of that habitat. That's a sexy fire.
Well, and so what it shows me when I look at it, I don't know this for sure. We're just looking. Mm-hmm. It looks like this fire made jumps. Like it burned up to this point, and then all of a sudden it ignited and burnt over here, and then it jumped. Look at the gap. So there must be a creek or something here, and it jumped over and then burnt this side. It's created all, and look at that. I mean, the edge is crazy.
Yeah.
Especially look at this edge.
Yeah.
And so, not all fires are created equal. Mm-hmm. And so I like to look at this level of detail, and you'll notice that in Google Earth on these toolkits, look how fine the edge is. When you look at a lot of the hunting apps, what they've done is they've smoothed out the edges. They've made them a little more visual to the eye.
Yep.
They're real bad about doing that with topography contour lines as well. And that's one of my beefs about the hunting apps is that they have smoothed out the contour lines to make it visually appealing. Screw that. I need to know what the country really looks like.
Right.
And this is like the same with fires is the level of detail that's available. I mean, even the little burn pocket like that, right?
I mean, I can just picture in some of these little islands it's like a clear cut field over here in the middle of a dense timber thicket. I mean, they're just going to love that.
So, we're just looking at it. So I can tell already this looks like they've logged out this burn because you can start to see all the road structure in here. And so without knowing anything and just pulling up this burn layer, we're able to kind of make some deductions here.
Yeah.
And so I like to look at the edges. I like to look at 40 years worth of fires. It goes clear back to the 1980s. And I think that when you can use this kind of tool side by side with your hunting app, you've got a winning formula.
There's other parts to this that we need to get into on another episode. We were talking about it earlier as we walk through this. I think it's very valuable to bring to the audience. There's a few issues, okay? One that we need to tackle in the next episode is grazing. How many times have you been to an area, it's just packed with sheep or cattle or something, and you didn't know it till you got there, or you've stayed away from an area for like a couple of years because there's cattle, but now there's not, and you don't know it.
Yeah,
and you're just assuming
is it still being active in your age or not?
Yeah,
right.
And it does change the behavior patterns of the wildlife that's on there at the same time, especially like sheep, and we'll get into that on the next one. The other one is the campground stuff you were showing me was pretty impressive too. So there's a few other things. Let's get into that on the next show. But for people that are listening to this, they can go, because it might be intimidating to some people when it gets too techie.
Yeah.
But you've made it really simple. All they have to do is...
It's a one file download. So for example, Brian, this Colorado file, when you close this up, this Colorado map data toolkit, when you sign up on Treeline Academy for the Colorado map data toolkit course, now remember it's a course. It gives you an overview of what it is.
You've got some video of you explaining it in like with pictures, and
it's how to use it, how to install it,
even a dummy,
how to optimize
like
Google
Ryan.
Earth Pro. You know, I made a decision when I built these toolkits that I couldn't just build them and give them to people. I had to build them and then show them step by step how to install it, why they need it, how to use it, and how to implement it.
And you'll also walk them through real quick how to set their preferences in Google Earth that you have the right views and elevations. Because
remember, Google Earth was not built for hunters.
No.
I mean, I'm telling you, the people that created Google Earth didn't say, you know what, I wonder what the elk hunters are going to, how they're going to use this. But so the preferences that comes as a default are not optimized for hunting. So for example, when you look at the 3D view in Google Earth, the elevation exaggeration, meaning how high the mountains look or the hills look, is not set the way you should set it if you're a hunter. It's set for people that are doing other things. So in the course, I show you how to go through and do all of the settings, end to end, all of the panels.
I like it. They can get like the Colorado map data toolkit. It'll go into their own Google Earth Pro, but it's web-based. So this is something that's really interesting. It's a linked, what do you call it?
It's a networked linked file from a technical perspective.
So you were talking about 2023 data. You're talking about how some of the unit data can change, the boundaries and so forth for each unit. And this is the sort of thing when someone buys this from you, it's continually being updated on your end, so they have the latest and the greatest info without having to go and do anything new. It just populates into their tool.
So, for example, every year I'm going to go and download the new fires. Like, I've already got the 2022 fires already loaded in here, right? But the 2023 fires that are occurring right now, I'll be loading those in January or February when they come out with the final borders.
Details, yeah.
And then when I load in the 2024 data, the next time you open up your toolkit, you can see right here on the screen, you see the folder with the green circle.
Yeah.
Whenever you see a folder with the green like that in Google Earth, that means the data is stored somewhere else. So I set up a Treeline Academy Amazon server. So I have an S3 server, super high-end server that I purchased, and I have all of this data sitting on that server. So when I upload the new Colorado Toolkit, the minute you refresh that, the 2023 data will be there.
Unit numbers, unit boundaries,
if they change the units, if they change the cattle, if they change the roads. So I refresh this data. For example, I just found.
So it's not unlike our hunting apps, basically.
No, it's very similar. And everybody's like, well, good point. I use hunting apps. Why would I need this? Well, guys, the hunting apps don't do this. They don't allow you to turn on and off the
archery over-the-counter units.
Archery over-the-counter units for the whole state. And then let me turn on all the units again.
So basically what you're looking at is they don't go into the dynamic detail that you can do with Google Earth.
And it gives you a second verification.
Yeah. Well, you were showing me like that campground stuff.
We'll get into that.
And yeah, the way you can drill down, you can't do that in a hunting app.
And the roads, guys, the biggest mistake that these apps make sometimes, because it's complicated. I'm not dissing on them, but roads that are open, roads that are closed, seasonal, it's messy.
Yeah. The thing is this is another tool to add to your toolkit.
That's exactly it.
This isn't to replace your we are heavily dependent on like our Go Hunt maps.
This can't go in the field.
No.
This is pre-hunt e-scouting tool. And but what it does, it leverages the power of Google Earth. And what I mean by that is Google Earth has the best aerial imagery available, hands out. There's no question. None of the hunting apps have the level of clarity and zoom in capabilities of Google Earth. Nobody.
Yeah.
The historical imagery. Being able to look back years and years of images and being able to see the dates of the images and the 3D view, guys. All the hunting apps are getting better and better, right, with 3D views, but they still do not touch the capabilities of Google Earth Pro.
The thing about those hunting apps that like the terrain analysis that
Go on
has,
great tool.
There's things like that when you open that desktop version and you open the Go Hunt Maps desktop version of the terrain analysis tool over here, and you got your Google Earth over here, you're contrasting what you're getting from each because they don't all do the same.
That's right.
Do the same thing at the same levels. And one thing you were saying earlier to me when you were walking through this in your office with me was by comparing two side by side, you get a more complete picture because some are missing a road,
right?
Or one is missing this or missing that.
Conflicting data. One says the road is open, one says the road is closed. What do you do? Well, that makes you say, I got to do some more investigation.
Right.
Maybe I better go to the National Forest website and get the actual PDF and see what's going on.
So you invented these. You brought these these toolkits together, and how it's like if somebody wants one. They're not very expensive.
No, guys, this really was built to supplement what I was doing with the e-scouting course. And you mentioned this earlier. So a lot of guys, reaching out and saying, Mark, I feel like I know what I'm doing e-scouting and finding out, but man, I could really use this data set.
Yeah.
So maybe you feel like you don't need any help finding out, but you would like to have some tools.
Just the tools.
Just the tools.
Maybe you're pretty good already. You're like, but gosh, I don't want to import the fire data.
Yeah,
I don't want
I'd like
to
have this tech tool.
Data. I don't want to import the hunt unit data. I don't want to have to go and build out my Google Earth Pro. And honestly, I think one of the big reasons people don't leverage Google Earth Pro is because of all the groundwork that they need to go through to get it set up. Now that you've taken all the work out of that, a guy can just go through and get that state or multiple states, and boom, they basically have an hunting app, but with using Google Earth.
Yeah, but
even more powerful.
So, what's important about it is that the amount of time. So, for example, to build this Colorado out the way I've got it, we're talking. It took me to build the 6 states that I have. It took me a year and a half of work.
Yeah.
Now, not all solid, obviously.
And again, back to the thing is, it's like, okay, Mark, I'm looking at it and I go, okay, I see that you've built this out. But again, why do I need to use Google Earth at all? And we keep going back to because you just can't get the same level of information.
And there's just some things that Google Earth does better. Now, remember, I'm talking about pre-hunt.
I know. And I think that this has given people a preview of like the fire information, for example, that you can there's certain fire details you're only going to get here. The way you have shown the borders of the fire, the way you're showing the ages of the fire, whether it's a double burn or not, you can figure this stuff out through your drop down menus and your layers that you turn on and off and so forth. So, but there's way more than that. We just scratched the surface here, but if somebody is just hunting Colorado and they're like, okay, I want to import all this data so I can upgrade my Google Earth Pro to be more effective for me. It's what?
$19.
$19. Okay.
And with your code, it's 20% off of that.
Nice. So folks,
you're talking pennies.
I always forget. Use the code Gritty.
Use the code Gritty, and it's 20% off of that.
So $20.
They're let's $19 per state.
For me, I want to buy them all.
Well, then you buy this one. This toolkit bundle right here. It comes with all 6 states, and it comes with the Spring Bear custom set.
You've got Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Utah, Wyoming. And you're going to add more?
Yeah, I'm adding more. I'm working on Arizona and New Mexico right now.
Sweet.
They're very complicated. So here's the problem is these states are not all created equal.
Right.
Some states are more technically advanced than others. Like Oregon. It didn't take me that long to build the Oregon toolkit because they were really good about their GIS. Colorado's terrible. Montana, not so great, right?
Right.
Wyoming was pretty good. Idaho was good.
I bet you one of the reasons Oregon is just because of all the logging business and all the money that they poured into. That's the foundation of that state for so long.
So mapping is a big deal over there, right?
Yeah.
Especially on public lands. So, so we're going to make this a series. So we only scratched the surface, right?
Yep.
So in the next upcoming episodes, we're going to dig into a couple more. I want to show you some more. But you can get the toolkits 6 individual states, or you can get the bundle that include. Now that I'm not trying to sell you on this, but the bundle is important because I made the decision that I don't want to play games with this, Brian. If you buy the bundle and I add Arizona, you just get it. Yeah. There's no extra cost.
Okay, cool.
So if there ends up being 20 states, you get all 20 for $39. I'm not going to play games like, okay, now I added Arizona, so the price is going up.
So if somebody buys the bundle for $39, then every year as you add states, they get them for free.
That's right. They're just included in the bundle.
And if they buy 2, they're out $39 anyway.
That's right. It's a no-brainer.
Buy the whole thing.
And here's the cool thing. When you buy the bundle, it's one file. It took me a while to figure out how to do it. But when you download the one single file and you open in Google Earth, it looks just like that. Bam.
Super clean.
All the states. So when you go through and you start opening up all these states.
All that detail below each state is there.
Every state averages. They're not all the same. But like, for example, in Colorado, we're going to talk about this coming up, but I've got some pretty detailed elk and mule deer migration data that I found, which is great.
Yeah.
Now, not all states have it. Right?
No. But, not all states have.
But as I find this, so not only if you buy the bundle do you get the additional states, but as I find more data and add it, you get it as well.
Yeah, this is well worth. It's a very low cost, and you put a lot of work into it. It's a good trade. It's a great trade.
I think what it does is if your time is valuable to you, which time is one of our biggest problems right now as a population, right? If you want to spend the next 6 months building out and take some pride in doing it, then do it.
Dude,
then do it.
$20 for my state and it's $40 for all the states. Look, just it's just cool. So if I have a tag right now, which I do, I have some tags in various states. I want to come in here, dig into this, look at my unit and pour over my unit, turn on these different layers, figure out what the heck's going on. And then if people do take your e-scouting course, there's even more detail in there in terms of what to look for. Like we've covered in earlier podcasts, people should go back and check that out. But like slopes and benches,
all the details,
zones of pressure, step by step, like water sources, where your hunt plan number 1, your backup plan, and your third plan in case a certain area doesn't work out. There's too many people there, or there's just no elk. All that kind of stuff is covered in your e-scouting course that people can pick up if they want to, and they'll save if they use the code GRITTY. And that course is hugely popular. I think you have how many reviews do you have on it?
I have about 150. I have almost 200 reviews, and I've never gotten anything less than a 5-star, and I have about 4,000 members now.
So 4,000 people have bought it, and you have about a 5-star review.
And I have 100% guarantee. If you get it and it's just not your thing, you just mention it to me and it's done. I had one guy, poor guy from Arizona, this older guy. I got on the phone with him 3 times to try to help him install Google Earth on his computer. And he just couldn't get it figured out. So I told him, I'm like, dude, when you're ready, I'll give you the course for free. But for now, I'm going to refund you and the deal is to use my tools, you have to be willing to or capable of getting into your computer and getting some level of knowledge. Now, I've cut the learning curve down. But you have to be able to do some things.
I mean, come on, dude. Mark, you're talking about old people who can't figure this out. Seriously, they got to be old.
I have a kindred spirit.
I hate to say it, folks, but this is as basic as it comes. Open Google Earth Pro and click on some icons. Like, it's not that hard. But I hate to say that, and someone's sitting there going, it is for me. But Lampers is actually way better at this
than we give him credit. We like to throw him under the bus, but
there's 2 things that he's willing to learn technology for. Well, there's one really. Can I kill a bigger animal?
One.
Can I find a bigger animal? Then I'm motivated to figure out how to figure out tech. So he's very good at his mapping tools in comparison to the average Joe. He's very good at using in scouting and all of that. He'll find the same you guys will look at the same unit and you'll both pick the same 3 spots as the ideal spots to find your animal.
He's good.
He's gotten better.
He's better than, and I think I'm going to throw him under the bus here.
Which is annoying because he can do that, but he can't turn on a camera.
I think it's more by choice. I'm starting to figure out now. He's convinced Hillary that he can only use hunting apps. He can't edit podcasts.
Right.
He can't edit a podcast.
No.
That's beyond his. He
even send an email might be rough.
So he is. He is. He's been very clever about how he does it, but
it's real easy. So folks can go to treelineacademy.com.
TreelineAcademy.net. And if you'd like to read more just about the toolkits, the website's got everything you need to know.
Yeah. The toolkits are cool. I think this is really good for people who are wondering that have, what are you talking about? What's this toolkit? And we got a little overview with the fire situation. We'll get into a couple other things that the toolkits can do on another episode. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Thanks for supporting us as always. And we'll catch you on the next one. Good luck this season. Stay gritty.